Lights Out is based off of the short film that came out a couple years ago on YouTube, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking that out. And basically, the premise for this movie is you have this demonic-looking woman who's haunting this family, and you could only see her in the dark. And the movie stars Teresa Palmer, Gabriel Bateman, Alexander DePerzia, and Maria Bello, and was directed by David F. Sandberg, who's going to be directing the upcoming Annabelle sequel. Hopefully that's better than the first one. Anyway, my anticipation for this movie was really high. I was really looking forward to the movie. I loved the premise and I loved the short film. But I wasn't sure if they could stretch a 2-minute short film that basically had no story to a 90-minute movie. But I'm happy to say I had a really fun time with Lights Out. I liked all the characters. They were really the anchor of this movie. Because the short film didn't really have any characters. It had that one girl who didn't even have any dialogue. So I like how they formed this family and the movie is centered around them. So all of them are really great, especially the character of Brett. He really stood out to me. In the beginning of the movie, I thought he was going to be the typical douchey boyfriend, but actually he wasn't. Matter of fact, she was the one kind of punking him in the beginning of the movie. So I really liked that. And they all had great chemistry, especially Teresa Palmer and Gabriel Bateman. Gabriel Bateman was also really great in the movie. Like I've said many times, it's really hard to find a good child actor, and he's one of them. I also really like the premise of turning off the lights and you could see this demonic silhouette, and you turn the light back on and she disappears. I really like that. I think that's really inventive and really unique. And that idea generated a lot of good scares, and this movie has a bunch of jump scares. Now, normally you'll hear me say I hate jump scares. I think they're pretty lazy, actually. It's just a really loud noise. It doesn't scare you, it just kind of startles you. But I'm surprised, I thought I would never say this, but this movie actually pulls off jump scares, which this whole movie is like jump scare after jump scare after jump scare. And I think part of the reason is a lot of the jump scares were kind of hard to predict. They would be doing something and I would be like, yep, a jump scare is going to pop up. But then a jump scare didn't happen, and then seconds later, something else popped up at you. Which, I think this is the type of movie that needs jump scares. Which is something I thought I would never hear myself say, but it's true. Take musicals, for example. I'm probably going to sound weird right now, I don't know. Let me know if you agree with me, but musicals, for example, they're all random. It has nothing to do with the story. They just randomly break out in song and dance, and sometimes the songs are just exposition for the movie. But Pitch Perfect, for example, is that a musical? Because there's just as much music throughout that movie, but the only difference is the story calls for the music. They're having that competition, so the story requires them to sing back and forth. Unlike musicals, where it's just completely random. You get what I'm saying? This horror movie really called for jump scares because the entire premise is a giant jump scare. You turn off the light and something pops up at you. You turn it on and it disappears. You turn it off and then it pops up at you even closer. I mean, that's a huge jump scare within itself. I think jump scares actually really worked in this movie. And the lighting in this movie is also top notch, which it has to be. I mean, the movie's called Lights Out. But they really get creative with the lighting. Teresa Palmer's character also lives above a tattoo parlor, so there's this giant light outside her window that occasionally flashes into her room. And I thought that was really inventive. I think they showed in the trailer where the red light's flashing in her room, and then Diana, the creepy silhouette, appears, and then disappears and appears. That was really well done, as well as flashlights, candles, a black light, just all that stuff really comes to play in this movie. But like I said, it's the characters that hold this movie together. It's their story. Without this family, all those jump scares wouldn't matter. The entire thing would fall apart. Because, like I said, this movie is really about this fractured family, and I liked that. Something else I noticed is, like the short film, this movie felt very low budget. Which obviously it had a higher budget than the short film. But for a full-length feature film, it felt very low budget. Which, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not a negative, it's not a positive. I'm just calling it as I see it. It is what it is. Which I don't think horror films need a huge budget. I mean, The Conjuring had a big budget, which that movie felt more like a horror summer blockbuster film. As well as the sequel, which had a bigger budget. And not every film needs a huge budget. Paranormal Activity was dirt cheap to make. And I know what you're thinking. Billy, why are you using Paranormal Activity as an example? That movie sucked. Well, actually, I liked the first Paranormal Activity movie quite a bit, actually. So you don't need a huge budget. Just flicker some lights, have Diana pop at you, have some good scares, shove popcorn down your face. It's a good time. Which, that's the type of movie it really is. It's not like a grounded movie. It's just a fun horror movie. And like the short film, this movie didn't have a crazy amount of story, which obviously has a lot more story than the short film. The short film didn't even really have the story. And I can't blame them. It definitely felt like they took something that was 2 minutes and stretched it into a 90-minute movie. But luckily the pacing was good. It was a really tight movie. Now I would take a short movie with minimum story than a 2.5 hour movie where you're watching the movie and you're like, in this chunk of this movie, you have given me this much information that could have been done in this amount. So I would rather watch this movie than other movies where I'm watching it and I'm like, what are you doing? You could easily cut all this stuff out. It doesn't need to be this long. You're just stretching it for the sake of stretching it. Like Peter Jackson's King Kong starring Jack Black. I swear, if that movie started with them arriving at Skull Island, it would have been a much cleaner movie. But instead, they tacked on that beginning, which slowed the movie down a huge deal. So while I can tell it definitely felt like a really short movie, there's nothing I could really cut out of the movie, and there's nothing I could really add in the movie. Like I said, it's a really clean, tight movie. Something I also loved about this movie is the characters were smart, they were relatable, they were actually making wise decisions. You know those classic horror movies where you're like, don't go in there, don't go in there, something's bad's gonna happen, you're gonna die. These characters actually make smart decisions, and I like that. But my biggest negative of the movie actually happened earlier on in the movie, which is, there's a scene where Teresa Palmer sits down with her little brother, and it's basically just a huge exposition scene. I found it to be really lazy, actually. It was almost as if she was sitting down the audience and saying, here's everything you need to know to move forward. Like, what about the previous minutes, the future minutes we're going to have? They could have easily have spread that out, found a more inventive way to feed you that information. So, it did feel a tad bit lazy. But nevertheless, this is definitely an enjoyable horror movie. I would definitely watch it again. I would definitely recommend this to any movie fan. So I had a good time with this movie. I had a lot of fun with it. I had a lot of good scares. So I'm going to give Lights Out a 7 out of 10. So are you planning on seeing Lights Out this weekend? And also, what is your favorite horror movie of all time? Mine's The Conjuring, obviously. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Make sure to like the video. And as always, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.